Click on the first link in the description. It'll bring you here. Before we can download the level editor, we need to get GitHub Desktop. So click on this, and then click on Download for Windows. Once you've downloaded that, copy and paste this link right here. Then go into GitHub Desktop, click File, click Clone Repository, click URL, and then paste this into here. And then make the local path something like this. I already have the level editor installed, but you don't. So click Clone, and then it's going to start a really long download. Once you have that done, you should have something that looks like this. At the top, you can select your current branch of the level editor. If you're working for Shrek 2.2, click this. If not, stay on main. Anytime you want to switch your editors, simply click the other branch. Anytime you want to update your level editor, simply click Fetch Origin, and if it sees something, it'll allow you to pull it. And once you do that, it is updated. Here is the level editor directory that I've installed everything to. To open the level editor, we need to go into the system folder, and then we need to run unrealed.exe. However, it's not going to fit the monitor perfectly, so we can right-click on this, click Properties, click Compatibility, and then tick this box and set it to Windows XP Servers Pack 3. Then click Apply, and run it. Here we are in the level editor. This is the first time I open up the level editor, so this will be what it looks like for you every time. Alright, let's get down to business. So here we are in a completely empty map. How do we start making a map? First off, you need to understand that this entire void that we're looking in is completely solid. It is not empty like it is in most modern engines. So we're going to need to subtract out of this massive void in order to create a playable space for the character. Over on the left, you're going to see a lot of brushes that we can use. A brush is simply a shape that we can use to either add something into the void or remove something into the void, also known as adding and subtracting. Let's first create a really big box. So right-click on any of these brushes you want. I'm going to use the box because it's the most simple. These are all the properties that we're going to modify in order to make our brush. If we click build, you're going to see that what is called the builder brush gets built. So it essentially represents all the variables that we've set in here. If we, for instance, wanted this box to be a little bit bigger, we could set this to 1024, and then as you can see, now we have a big box. To move around in this viewport, I'm going to close this. Use the left mouse button to move around horizontally. Then you can hold the right mouse button if you want to look around. And if you want to move up and down, you hold both the left mouse and the right mouse button. This will allow you to move vertically. These controls may seem unintuitive, but trust me, at some point in your level editing career, it becomes very intuitive. As for these viewports over here, simply hold right-click on these, and then you can use scroll wheel to determine how zoomed in you are. Or if you really want, you can hold both the left and right mouse button, and then move the mouse up or down to scale it. Alright, we've made a builder brush, but we haven't actually done anything with the brush. As far as the level is concerned, nothing has actually been subtracted out of the world, so this is still a completely solid void. How do we fix that? Well, if you see down here, these are all of the actions that we can do with our builder brush. We can add or subtract it from the void. Since I've already told you that this is a solid void, simply click subtract. And now, as you can see, we have a box in the middle of nowhere. However, this box doesn't actually exist quite yet because we need to rebuild the level. How do we rebuild the level? Take your cursor and click on this button up here, the Build All button. Whenever you click this, you're going to see that this box turns completely pitch black. And we're also getting a warning that is telling us that all of the materials on the walls are not assigned, which is accurate. I want to be able to see the walls, so I'm going to change my rendering mode from dynamic light up here to textured. This renders the map without any sort of lighting. So this box right here needs some light. Let's go down here and right-click on a surface down here. As you can see, a lot of options have just appeared. What we want to do is add a light. So click light, and now you can see that we've just placed an actor in the level physically. You're going to notice pretty quickly that this level editor treats basically everything as an actual object in the level, even going as far as the camera that you're using to navigate around your own map. Now that we have this light, let's change back to the dynamic light mode. And as you can see, the light is now lighting up the room. But you might have noticed that this light is very dark. So I just clicked on this with left click, and now I'm able to move it in the viewport that I'm currently in. I can do that by holding down Control, and then by holding left and right mouse, I can move it up and down. If I'm holding just left mouse, it moves it left to right, and if I hold right mouse, it moves it forward and backward. Additionally, we can also move the light in other viewports, such as this viewport right here, or I can simply move it to the very center and then move it up, and now it's in the center. Anyway, how do we modify the properties of this actor? Look at this button up here. This is the actor properties button. Simply click on this while you have your actors selected, and it will pull up a properties window. You can modify any of these properties. This just takes a lot of learning, but in this case, all we're going to want to modify is the light radius and then the light brightness. So first off, a light brightness of 64 is pretty low. I typically like having a light brightness of at least like 150 whenever I'm working with anything. The light hue is essentially the range of color it's going to pick from. This is only going to be obvious once you turn on the light saturation, because when the light saturation is maxed to 255, this essentially means that no color is going to be shown through this light color. So if we were to turn this down to 0, you're going to see that it goes to red because red's the default. But if we try modifying this, as you can see, it like goes through like all the range of colors. Let's pick a blue. And then let's turn up the saturation pretty significantly, so it's like a cool colored light. I still don't think this is bright enough, so I'm actually going to turn it up to 250. And now I'm going to build all. And as you can see, now we have a room that is lit up perfectly fine, which is all well and dandy. But how do we actually get to play the map? Well, we're going to need to place down Shrek. So we could go over to one of the mini browsers for assets, such as the actor browser, where we can find basically any actor in the entire game. You might notice it's a bit difficult to navigate, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. This simply comes with a lot of practice. I know where Shrek is. He is all the way over here in pawn, KW pawn native, KW pawn, SH character, SH hero pawn, Shrek. You're just going to have to figure that out, or if you already happen to know the class name of every single actor, then you can simply run a console command down here, click this right here, and then type in the console command set current class, and then class equals, and then the class name. So in this case, Shrek. And as you can see, it sets my current class to Shrek. So that means that anytime I try placing down an actor, whenever I right click on anything, at the very top right here is going to be my selected actor. So let's go ahead and add Shrek. Here is Shrek. He's doing wonderful. However, you may notice that he is very shadowy, and you may wonder how to fix that. We can fix that by applying a global glow to everything. So let's go on over to View and click Level Properties. Now, when we get into the Zone Info actor, you're going to have to change each Zone Info manually instead of doing what I'm about to do. But for this example, this will work just fine. Let's go into Zone Light and then change the ambient brightness to something like, I don't know, 32. And as you can see, Shrek now looks perfectly normal, as you would expect. However, we should build the lighting again. If you don't want to click this build all button because this builds every single aspect of the level every single time, you can just click the build lighting button because this is more than likely what you're going to click every time anyway. As you can see, the level got a bit brighter, and this is because the global glow actually applies to every surface in the whole level. So now I'm going to need to turn down the brightness of this a bit, as expected. I'm going to do that, build lighting, and there we are. Now everything looks pretty well lit. The last thing I would add is a player start. This is in your right-click context menu. As you can see right here, the player start. Place this down. In Shrek 2 specifically, it doesn't really matter where you place this down, and you don't really need to attach anything to this. So just put it down somewhere in the level that is playable, preferably around the start of the level. And now we're ready to save the level. So let's go over here to File and then click Save As. Now I'm going to put this in my map developer directory. You can put this in any sort of Shrek 2 directory you want. Just make sure that this at the top has no spaces. In fact, if you click on this right here, you'll see that pulls up the literal directory. Notice how there are absolutely no spaces in this entire path. That is very important, believe it or not, because if there are spaces, it's not going to save. Now let's save the map. Let's save it as test.unr. Just kidding, do not name it test. Never name a map test because it'll crash the game. So let's name this test map instead. Then click save, and as you can see, it saves the map to that directory. Now let's go ahead and play it. Alright, so now we're in the game. First, load into a level, and now we want to type in a console command to open into our map. In this case, I'm going to type open test map. If you don't have the console unlocked, please check the link in the description, which tells you how to unlock it. So, open it, and as you can see, here we are. We are now in this level that we have made. It's a beautiful level, I know. So, there's not much we could do in this level. It's obviously just a box, as you were able to see. There's not much to it. So let's go ahead and add some rooms to it. Anytime we want to modify this map while the game has the level open, we need to do a save load, meaning we need to save the game, then load the game. Or optional, you can just go back to the main menu. Either work. Let's go back to the level editor, and let's create another room. So I'm going to make a room. I'm going to actually make it a little bit smaller than this room by a pretty significant margin, just because I feel like doing something a little bit squirrely. You might notice that I'm using pretty specific values, and that's because I'm trying to make every single value in here divisible by a value of 16, because this generally makes your map's performance a lot more stable. So I do recommend getting into the habit of doing this for brushes. So here we go. Let's just move this down here. If whenever you're moving something, it's not aligning the way you need it to, like perhaps it's not in the right grid space, modify this down here. This is your grid size. I currently have it on a value of 16, which means every 16 Unreal units, it's going to snap. So you might need this lower, you might need this higher. Typically, a value of either 16, 8, or 4 will be good enough. So let's move this over here, and then we're going to click subtract. Wait, that's behind me. Never mind. I'm going to put it over here. All right, now let's click subtract. And as you can see, we've now made a doorway. Really looks cool, doesn't it? Now let's create another room within this area. Build that, close it. And since I'm feeling squirrely, let's just make this room randomly dip down for no reason in particular other than we can do that. Once we're at this point, simply build the map. As you can see, the brightness of this room is pretty dark. You might wonder why it's not pitch black like you were noticing at the very beginning of this tutorial, and that's because we have a global glow to all of the surfaces in the level. Let's take this light and move it into this at least. That doesn't look like complete garbage. And there we go. So let's save the level and then go back into it. I'm going to type RL, or you can type restart level. It doesn't matter. Either work. And here we are in the level. It appears that I have soft locked myself in this room, so that's great map design there. Don't do this. So last thing we're going to do for this tutorial segment is I'm going to make a staircase. So if we click build, as you can see, it's going to make a staircase. It looks really cool. Let's see if we can make a staircase that successfully leads us out of here. So you might be wondering, how am I rotating this? The way I'm rotating this is by holding Control and left click. And it allows me to rotate this. If you need very specific rotations, you can manually assign a rotation here. For the purposes of this, I'm going to see how this fits. As you can see, this staircase is not high enough. We need more steps. Okay, this staircase is going to be really scuffed, but yeah, we could do something like this. And now we're going to have a staircase. So simply click build, and as you can see, we now have a staircase. By the way, if you want to hide this builder brush, press B while in this viewport. Now you might wonder, how do we modify the textures on all this stuff right here? Let's assign a texture to everything. So if we select any of these walls, or what's referred to as a poly or a surface, we can modify the surface properties of all of these. As you can see, there's some properties we can modify here, but the main thing that we're focused on is just selecting all of the surfaces in the map. Each surface is assigned to a brush. Do you remember whenever we subtracted this room? Yeah, this brush right here is a solid object, as you can tell. So if we select this and then press the shortcut Shift B, it's going to select all of the surfaces that are tied to the brush in this area. Right, so if we control click another surface, as you can see, it's going to continuously select another surface instead of just deselecting everything and then selecting the surface you collect. And then select these last two brushes, and then press Shift B. And now you can see we have every surface in the map selected. Let's open up the texture browser. So within the texture browser, we're able to select a bunch of textures. If you're making an indoor map, typically you're going to find textures for that either in here or here. So I'm going to pick this, and then I'm going to maximize this window. As you can see, there's a bunch of textures in here. Whenever we select any texture in here while we have all these surfaces in here selected, what you're going to notice is that it's going to apply that texture to every single surface we currently have selected. This is how you can texture your maps. So I'm going to pick a really ugly texture like this. but you're going to notice that this texture doesn't look great on floors. So let's go ahead and select all of the floors manually by control clicking them. Now let's apply the floor texture, and then let's apply the ceiling texture. As for this staircase, let's make this staircase a completely different texture and just make it this texture for no reason. I know it looks ugly, but we're going to work with it. All right, I'm going to save the map. Maps automatically save every 5 minutes. If your map randomly gets corrupted, then go ahead and check your level editor directory and go to maps. There's going to be some maps in here called auto and then just a random number. These are your backup maps. So let's try to fix the alignment issues that we have. As you can see, these textures right here do not align even a little bit. They're not even trying. And all these textures right here, they're just repeating, which looks terrible. So we're going to need to use something called texture alignment. I'm going to be very generic and just apply a general alignment technique to all of these surfaces. So let's select all of the surfaces again. Let's go over to the surface properties, go into alignment, and then let's just simply click on planner right here. And typically this alignment method is going to be good enough to make everything look fine. As you can see, now all these don't look completely terrible, which is nice. If these textures are too small, you can just simply modify the scale of them with this, with the higher number, meaning the smaller the size of the texture itself. So let's go ahead and do that. However, you might notice that the texture looks like it's stretched vertically. This is because this field is still selected, so it actually hasn't been registered. So if I click on this field again and then click it now, it's going to scale correctly. I don't know why that's a thing, but you should be aware of that. Anyway, I'm going to set this back to 1, click on this field so that both fields are applied, click align. Now let's click save and check it out in game. So here's our map. You can tell it's just an absolutely beautiful map. Yeah, that's the basics of making a map. With these principles, you should be able to do nearly anything you need. However, I will get into one tiny aspect of mapping, and by tiny I mean massive, which is the static meshes. Click on this up here, the static mesh browser, and then let's select a static mesh pack. These are models in the game that we can just place down at will. So let's go ahead and pick... What is this model? Okay, let's pick this model. So we have it selected. So if we right click right now, as you can see, the add static mesh prompt is now set to our current static mesh selection. So if we click this, it's going to add it in. At this point, we can modify basically anything about this. You might have been looking at the left this whole time and notice these right here. You might have been wondering what these are. These are modes that you can use. By default, you're basically always using camera movement, but if you're not, then you may want to use some of these other types of editors, which are pretty self-explanatory, except for the terrain editor, which is a really crazy tool. So perhaps you wanted to like rotate this actor. You can click this right here, and now control left mouse, control right mouse, and control left right mouse will now rotate the actor, as you can see. If you're like switching between these tools, you can get stuff done really fast. We could just scale like this, but you're gonna notice it's a little bit buggy. As you can see, I just scaled it, but it didn't actually do anything. So I have to go into here and then manually modify this. I have to round it, and then all of a sudden it works. So I don't really recommend using that tool much. If you want to scale it, please just use these right here if you want actually precise tools. So let's modify this to a value of 2, and then let's set this up so that we're essentially adding decoration into our map. Doesn't it just look beautiful? Let's build a lighting. Every single time we add something like this, we need to build a lighting so that it looks right. If you notice that any of these are overly dark, then either it's an issue with the model or it's an issue with the lighting in your map. So always try to mess around with the lighting in your map if it doesn't look right. If it still doesn't look right, it's probably something wrong with No Wonder. So let's save the map and then play it. And as you can see, we now have models in the map. This is the general concept that you will apply when trying to add any sort of models in your map. Now that you know roughly how to make a map, let's level that up a bit. Let's get into scripting. Scripting is a very powerful method of allowing mappers to modify their maps. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can click on key point, go to AI script, scripted sequence, and then scripted trigger. And if you place this down, then it will make this appear. This right here has a special property tab right here called AI script. I'm not going to explain this language to you because there's already a detailed wiki page that I've created that explains this entire language to you. Anyway, you might be asking what this is. If it's called a trigger, then what does it do? The fact that the word trigger is used in the name of this is pretty misleading because a trigger in the game is normally something that you can walk into and it activates something, but this is not that, so it's kind of a trick. So let's change that. I'm going to remove that, and let's make an actual trigger. Go into triggers, trigger, M triggers, because this is a custom trigger that I've made, and then M scripted trigger. And here's our scripted trigger. As you can see, it also has some actions in here, and you can already see it has one action in it. You might be asking what this is. Essentially, don't even pay attention to this. This action simply says that the script should not run until the trigger is touched. You might be asking where the collision of the trigger is, and you can check that by right-clicking this viewport right here, then clicking on Actors in Radii View, and now you can see the collision of the trigger. If we want to change the collision size of this, we could simply do something like this. We can modify the height of it, or we can modify the radius of it, just like so. So I could add this back here, and now I have like some weird trigger that you can run into. For the purposes of testing, I'm going to make this trigger visible, so I'm going to toggle be hidden to false. If you're overwhelmed by the amount of variables, please don't stress about it much, because inevitably, when you get bored in the level editor, you're just going to randomly tick a lot of these flags and variables and just see what happens, and it's really fun to do, but it does take a lot of time, and I'm not going to bother trying to explain it now because that would take way too long. Anyway, we have a script here, so let's add a new action to the script. If you already know how AI script works, then you already know what I'm about to do. If not, you can just observe the power of what I'm about to do. As you can see, there's a lot of actions down here. There's also a lot of M actions. These are all custom actions that I made. So I'm going to do a really basic one. And I am going to run a set prop. A set prop essentially modifies a property on a pawn to something else. So let's go in here. Let's make one set prop action. Let's just say that we want to modify the current player. This is a special tag, so it targets Shrek specifically. And then let's modify his health to be something like 64. All right, now let's test the level. As you can see, the trigger is visible. Whenever I walk up to the trigger, as you can see, my health is set to 64. And it's about as straightforward as that. This trigger is going to only be activated once, by the way, because B trigger only once is set to true. So this is a one-time use trigger. But yeah, while that script was incredibly simple, please keep in mind that if you want any control over your map, you need to learn scripting badly. Now let's get into optimization really quick. In every map, you need to focus on optimization. What is optimization? Optimization is the act of making the game perform faster because you've optimized your map in such a way where everything is able to render faster. How do we do that? Well, Unreal Engine 2 relies on something called zones. Now, what is a zone? This room right here, we can consider a zone. This room over here could be considered a zone. However, at the moment, all of this is considered one single zone. We can check that by clicking up here. And as you can see, all of this is basically the same shade, which is bad. We want these to be different shades. So we need to split off these rooms into zones, but how do we do that? We need to use sheets. So here's a sheet right here. This sheet right here, we need to have split off this hallway. So let's press B, and that'll make our builder brush active. Let's click build. That's what it's currently trying to make. So let's try to make it a point up. There we go. Now it's pointing up, which is what we need. This height of this hallway was originally 512 units by 256. So now we have a sheet that we can use to essentially fully encompass a hallway. If this is not perfectly encompassing the hallway, it's not going to work. You'll know if it doesn't work because whenever you build all with these zone portals set up, you're going to click this and everything's going to be the same color, or you're going to get like a Hall of Mirrors effect when you get in the game, or something is going to break really bad. So you need to be really careful about this. This is why I've specified that you should keep all of your brushes divisible by a value of 16 when building them. Anyway, now that we have a builder brush here, as you can see, fully encompasses this side of the hallway. So we need to make a special brush. So let's click on this, and then let's click on Zone Portal, and then click OK. Now we have made a zone portal. As you can see, it appears like a solid wall. In game, you're not going to see this. In the level editor, you will always see it. Let's split off these rooms into 3 different segments. So let's make another zone portal. There we go. Now let's build it. and then click this. And as you can see, we have successfully designated 3 different zones. This means that the engine is going to be actively trying to only render what is actually being rendered instead of the whole map all at once, because at the moment, everything in the map renders at once. But now that we've set this up, when applicable, it will be able to unrender these parts of the map. They'll only unrender when you're not looking at them or when your vision is being blocked. So let's save the map and then reload. And as you can see, nothing actually looks any different in our map despite what we have done. However, if I use R mode 1, you're going to notice that that stuff back there just unrendered. R mode 1, by the way, is just a console command to enable wireframe mode. It allows you to basically look through walls in a way to see what's actually rendering behind them. It's super useful. As you can see, that stuff back there is unrendering, which means we're actually doing something right. As you can see, this staircase will also unrender when I'm back here. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to see the staircase from here, but normally it would actually try to render it. But now that we've put the zones down, that's not going to happen. Now, it's worth mentioning that now that we have zones, do you guys remember when I was talking about zone info and level properties? Well, this is because now that we have zones, we can now place down what's called a zone info. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here's a zone info. I'm going to place it down in this area. So whichever zone this actor is in, it will modify those properties directly. As you can see, it has the same properties that we originally had. So now if I set this as something like this, you're going to see that the brightness of this room all of a sudden decreases while the brightness of these rooms actually remain the same. Now let me show the other optimization technique. This optimization technique is typically used for outdoor maps. And it's going to use something called an anti-portal. You can see that there's a dedicated button for this right here. An anti-portal is the polar opposite of a zone portal. A zone portal is used to split off parts of the map from rendering, while a anti-portal is used to specify what parts of the map you're not supposed to be able to look through. Typically, you don't always want this to be a sheet. I'm going to do it anyway because, I don't know, I'm a devil, I guess. So let's place this down right here. And we're going to make a really egregious anti-portal just so that you guys can see how it works. Here is where our anti-portal is going to be. Click this, and now as you can see, we have an anti-portal. Keep in mind that once you put this down, it's basically permanent. The only thing you can do to really change the size of it is to change this. Anyway, now that we're here, we could just simply save the map. We don't need to build it for that. And Alt RL, as you can see, some weird stuff is happening. And you might be asking me, why is this happening? This is because our anti-portal is telling the engine everything that the camera cannot see behind the anti-portal, unrender it completely. So as you can see, we got a Hall of Mirrors effect going on right over there. But if we go on the other side of this anti-portal, you can see everything looks completely fine. There's obviously this seam because this room is significantly darker deliberately because of the example I showed. In outdoor maps, you want to use anti-portals behind stuff like mountains and trees in order to unrender parts of the map. Because in outdoor maps, you can't just use zone portals because outdoor maps are just one really big room. That about wraps it up for everything I want to talk about in the level editor. If you have any questions, do let me know down in the comments. But yeah, that's gonna conclude this tutorial. I hope it helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions about updating the level editor or anything like that, do let me know, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Please join the Shrek Society Discord if you want more detailed help instead of just the comment section on YouTube. And if you want any future tutorials, do let me know, and I will see what I can do. Anyway, guys, see ya!